Before Disney saved the Marvel Universe and made even the most obscure Marvel heroes like the Guardians of the Galaxy household names by bringing all the heroes back under one umbrella. Marvel fell on hard times, and the film rights to the Marvel family of heroes were sold out to the highest bidder, with companies like 20th Century Fox, Sony, and Columbia Pictures all taking different heroes. This brought us into the golden age of superhero movies, delivering movies like the Tobey Maguire Spider-Mans, the 10-movie-long X-Men franchise, and the colossal flop that was the Fantastic Four. And just 1 year before the interconnected Marvel Cinematic Universe graced giant theater screens everywhere, one more hero got thrown into the mix, with Nicolas Cage starring as the titular character, Ghost Rider. The movie was met with poor reception, but doubled its budget at the box office to net itself a sequel, but we can talk about the many times Nicolas Cage has been on fire another time. Because I'm a little gamer boy, and like every other movie to release in the early 2000s, Ghost Rider had its very own PlayStation 2 licensed cash grab under the same name, Ghost Rider. Somehow I've made it 16 episodes without talking about the PlayStation 2 and its garbage fire of licensed games. But that wrongdoing ends today. The PlayStation 2 became the highest selling game console of all time, thanks to being an overpriced game console, but a reasonably priced DVD player that could occupy your kids. And I was one of those kids. Ghost Rider was a game I actually put a decent amount of time into as a kid, and it was one of the first games I picked up when I got into game collecting, so I was pretty excited to cover it for this video. But it wasn't long before I realized how much my child brain had warped my perspective of it. Ghost Rider was developed by Climax Studios, a company later acquired by a business software developer that decided to dabble in the game industry called Keyword Studios. The game was published by 2K Games that has mostly done a bunch of sports titles that nobody watching this cares about. But more importantly, they do Mafia, and I like the second one of those. The story of Ghost Rider, or what little story the game has, is told through these short comic panel scenes with voiceover done over the top of them to cover the narrative. And the story told doesn't follow along the same story of the movie at all. Unlike most movie tie-ins that throw a whole bunch of filler at you with little bits of actual story thrown in, very similar to everything to ever air on the CW, it's so loosely based on the movie they didn't even get Nic Cage to reprise his role. This guy looks more like a young Mel Gibson than he does Nicolas Cage, especially in this picture where it looks like they photoshopped his face onto the body. But at least we get another appearance from Steve Blum as the voice of Vengeance. The story for this game is written by two comic book veterans, Garth Ennis, known for creating both The Boys and Preacher, and Jimmy Palmiotti, best known for his work on Deadpool, Punisher, and Daredevil, along with his own created series Ash and Painkiller Jane. The story these two wrote skips all the origin stuff the movies cover, and goes straight to the post-Ghost Rider Johnny Blaze when he's confronted by the Marvel Comics version of the Devil, Mephisto, who wants Johnny's help stopping his son Blackheart from bringing on the apocalypse, with the whole apocalypse thing being the only thing pulled from the film the game is based on. Upon booting up the game, you're greeted by this Walmart shirt / your uncle's Facebook post-esque picture of Ghost Rider's face before jumping into the main meat of the game. Ghost Rider features 30 levels, which sounds like a lot, but you'll quickly realize that most of them only last between 2 to 5 minutes, with a few lasting up to 10 if you spend time doing what little exploration the levels allow. You can really bump that time up if you get to one of those rooms that's just a door on either side, and you forget there's a button to open doors, causing you to aimlessly run around the room for 5 minutes before hitting every button against a door to accidentally trigger it to open. The game is your typical hack and slash formula, so typical it's stolen directly from games like the original God of War and Devil May Cry. They stole so much, you might actually think you were playing one of those masterpieces if all the good stuff wasn't hidden under a heaping pile of jank. We've got your right stick dodge rolls, the fixed camera angles, doors blocked by hell energy till you kill all the bad guys. They even took the DMC style meter and slightly adjusted it to fit this game's style. The game opens up to the first level in a majorly reoccurring theme: hell, chasing down vengeance, both the villain and the noun, I guess. You'll swing your chain around and shoot your gun at everything that moves, running from room to room until you reach the level boss, or a big door that ends the level. With each level almost always being followed by a level that completely breaks the stolen formula, where you race your motorcycle from one end of a track to the other, while still murdering everything in your path. And after each demon murder is committed, you get rewarded with souls that will be your currency to unlock combat upgrades and bonus extras. Remember how I said that hell is a reoccurring theme? You can upgrade all your hell stuff. This game uses the word hell more than a Southern Baptist preacher. You have a hellfire chain, a hellfire shotgun, a hell cycle that blazes through hell on your journey to stop hell on earth. There's a hell of a lot of hell in this game. But let's stop talking about hell and get back to playing in it. Granted, you don't get stuck in this taunt animation without ever hitting the button that triggers it, that will constantly repeat for no reason at all at the start of the level sometimes. You fight a series of different enemy types through the game, starting with demon guys, as harder and harder enemies get added into the mix as you progress. You can do multiple combos of heavy and light attacks with your chain and hit them from a distance with a shotgun, as long as you have ammo. And when you collect enough demon charge, you can perform an attack that damages everything in a radius around you. Along with that, you can block attacks, and if you hit the attack button while you're blocking, you can do the most overpowered charge attack that was pretty much the only move I used after I discovered it. If you come across a fire and stand next to it, Ghost Rider will suck it into his skull and it will refill your health. And miscellaneous objects can be broken throughout the world for extra souls. When it comes to the bike missions is where the game really falls apart. The graphics are decent for a PS2 game, but the frame rate is so jittery that 90% of the time it becomes a blur of explosions and brown, so you really can't see where you're going. And this will cause you to constantly slam into the walls and completely miss jumps that will have you falling to your doom to be teleported back a few feet to miss the jump all over again, flinging you around like a Stretch Armstrong. When you can manage to stay on the bike for a little bit, you can shoot hellfire out of the front of your bike and swing your chain to either side to take down enemies in your way. Granted, those enemies aren't Ghost Rider's biggest weakness: water. When it comes to bosses, some of the fights are actually done in these motorcycle levels, where you have to keep up with the boss while firing shots at them and swinging your chain when you get close to them. But if you run into stuff or fly off your bike like you definitely will every 30 seconds, they can get away, leading to you needing to redo this chase all over again. For the standard boots on the ground bosses, it mostly comes down to learning an attack pattern and swinging when you can in between the dodges, outside of the nameless monster bosses that you can mostly just block lunge into over and over till they drop dead. A few of the bosses in the game will drop elemental souls after you defeat them, that you can feed to your health cycle to give your bike new abilities, including one that allows you to drive on water. Ghost Rider 1, Water, 75. For some reason, after almost every boss, the next level will be the same one you just did, in reverse, maybe adding in an extra room or path to get back to your bike so you can move on to the next area. The concept here, I guess, could be kinda cool to have to return to your bike, but in reality it just feels like you forgot to save and have to redo something you've already done, which makes that whopping 13 levels feel more like a medium 15. And this backtracking really becomes an issue when you get hit with this awesome save glitch like I did. After each level you get prompted with the option to save your progress, but there's a small window in between the prompt and when the actual game is saved. And if you're not paying attention and move on to the next level in that window, you get this big square covering your screen that will corrupt all your save data 20 levels in, making you start all the way back at the beginning of the game. If none of those issues stop you from making it to the end, you do get rewarded with a few extra costumes to play as for your next run through the game. The classic Ghost Rider outfit from the comics being the first, featuring the giant chest V. The next being the 2099 version of the character, which I'm usually a huge fan of the 2099 line of costumes, but the Ghost Rider one is too robotic, almost looking like a Terminator. A Chunky Vengeance is the next costume in the lineup, who looks awesome, but he's just a little bit square for some reason. But the most interesting of all is Blade. The vampire-hunting vampire makes a few appearances in the story, helping out Ghost Rider take down Blackheart, but if you choose to play as Blade, he isn't just a basic skin swap over Ghost Rider. Climax actually took the time to give the character his own playstyle and HUD. The chains are dropped and replaced with Blade's swords, which is also what his health bar is changed to. Blade doesn't use guns like Ghost Rider, along with that burst of hell energy being dropped, giving the character no ranged combat options, making crowd control a little more difficult. Blade also doesn't have the ability to suck fire into his skull for health, but they did take the time to swap out the penance stare for Blade sucking the blood out of enemies. Outside of the gameplay, if you bought all the combat upgrades, there's a wealth of extras and bonus content that can be bought with souls, including fully readable pages of classic Ghost Rider stories, concept art from the game's development, behind the scenes interviews, and even a making of documentary that shows alpha and beta builds of the game as it was coming together, as they explain how the game was made and what things Marvel asked to be changed or removed, and I always enjoy checking that stuff out. Along with the PlayStation 2 version, a PSP port was released alongside it that is the exact same game, but blue, with downgraded graphics that actually make the bike levels playable by having a solid frame rate, which is a really good thing because this port also added a racing mode that was fully playable online with multiple tracks and race types. In the end, Ghost Rider is a fun game with all of its stolen gameplay mechanics. How could it not be? But without the compelling story or polish of a God of War or a DMC, it starts to become repetitive really quick. The level scenery changes every few levels to change things up a little bit, with some being really cool to look at, like the carnival level at the end of the game, or the motorcycle race on the water. But honestly, that's not enough to keep the game interesting for 30 levels. However, the game did only take me about 3 hours to finish, so if you want something to replace your fidget spinner and keep you awake while you watch through one of the director's cuts of the Lord of the Rings movies, you can always throw this up on a second monitor. And after you attempt to flush the game down the toilet for corrupting your save 6 times, you can relax yourself by watching older episodes of Off the Panel, and subscribe to the channel now that you're a major fan. Go play Ghost Rider.
I'm like a prickly pear.